Hello, happy Monday. I hope everybody had a fantastic weekend. And as we get started with today's live Monday music motivation, I'm going to be talking about why mistakes are actually even worse than you'd think. And yes, it's normal to make mistakes, and it's a valuable learning process of practicing to make mistakes. So it's not the end of the world if you make a mistake, but making a mistake and not catching it or repeatedly making mistakes is very damaging to your learning. It's not optimal for learning and is really greatly reducing the efficiency of your practice. And today I'm talking about a cool idea from Dr. Molly Gebrian's book, Learn Faster, Perform Better, which is a fantastic practice book. If you don't have that, I highly encourage getting that and giving it a read, probably multiple times. I think it's one of the books that I'm going to continuously be referring back to all the time, because she does a fantastic job of laying out all of the sort of neuroscience of practicing and actually making it very, very applicable to playing the clarinet, or really whatever instrument or whatever type of music that you're studying, which is fantastic. I mentioned before the book Make It Stick, which is great. That's all about the science of learning, but that's more related to more kind of scholastic learning and academic learning rather than actually putting it into practice with music. A lot of the same studies are cited in both books, and it's a lot of the same ideas, but Dr. Gebrian actually applies it directly to music, which is really wonderful and more applicable to you if you're watching this, probably. So one of the ideas that she talks about in there is this idea of overlearning, which we'll get into a second. But the thing to know, and why this idea of not making mistakes and making sure that you're really quick to fix your mistakes is so important, has to do with how our brain is sort of processing the information. When it comes to playing, what we're trying to do is develop the coordination to achieve whatever we want to achieve for whatever music we're playing. What happens as we're developing that coordination is our brain starts from pretty much nowhere. There's a little bit of like past experience with playing scales, and even more so past experience with just wiggling your fingers. So that's all kind of in there. But what we need to do when we go to play a new piece of music is get that all connected with how the music actually goes, getting the accurate timing of the music, putting the fingers in the right order in the right places, and that kind of stuff. And as far as that specific thing goes, there's nothing in our brain that's already concretely doing that. So it's kind of just this very loose, liquidy soup, which is a very great image for thinking of that's what your brain looks like. But it's kind of this very loose thing, and we're trying to put down some patterns and have it kind of solidify and start to come together down the path that we want. And that part is super important. If it's just sort of loose back there and can go wherever it wants, it's just going to go wherever we do the repetitions in. So we have this very kind of unstable neural network of playing whatever the passage of music is, and it's going to solidify into whatever we're doing with it. So you can start to see why it's so important to not make too many mistakes and make sure that you're fixing mistakes right away. The fixing of the mistakes is valuable, and having your brain want to go down a certain path and be like, no, we're actually going down this path, that's good for the brain. But making sure that you do have that, no, let's go down this path, is very important, or it'll start going the other way. You've all experienced this where you've mislearned an accidental or forgot a note out of the key signature, or got the wrong rhythm kind of in your head on something, and it's just starting to come automatic that you're playing an F natural instead of an F sharp, or you're playing da 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 instead of da 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 da, or something like that. So finding those little things and experiencing that, you already know how easy it is for the brain to go down the wrong path. And once that has solidified, how hard it is to kind of unsolidify that and then retarget it at the right thing. And that's where this idea of overlearning comes in from Dr. Gebrian's book. And it's kind of, I think, a bad name. And as I'm getting more into the whole neuroscience of things, I think at some point I might come up with better names for all of these things, which might confuse it more because then there'll be multiple different names for them. But I think some of the names are very misleading. It makes it harder to understand than it needs to be. Overlearning seems like it would be something about, like, if you practice too much, then it's not good for you. What overlearning actually is saying is that you need to practice it correctly over a certain amount of times that you've practiced it incorrectly to solidify the right thing. And that seems pretty obvious, that you're thinking, okay, well, yeah, I have to do it more correct than I do it incorrect for it to go well, obviously. But the interesting thing about the overlearning studies is they found the amount of times and the amount of reps that you have to do to solidify something really correctly and have it going down the right path in your brain is actually dependent on the number of times that you've done it wrong. So you have to do it correct 50%, at least 50% more times than you've done it incorrect. And this is where the very interesting takeaway from this idea comes, is that it's not that you just have to do it more correct than you do it incorrect. It's that there's a very specific number of times you have to do it correct, dependent on the amount of times you've done it incorrect. So if you've done something incorrectly twice, then you have to do it correctly 3 times before the right thing is really going to be more solid and more reliable than the incorrect thing. So every repetition that you do incorrectly means that you have to do 1.5 more repetitions doing it correctly. And this starts to really amplify, and you can start to see why it's so important to catch your mistakes very, very early and be very clear from the beginning on how it should go correctly, because it's going to vastly reduce the amount of repetitions that you do. If you're in that kind of pointless practice trap where you're doing the same thing over and over and just hoping that it's going to get better, but it's not, you're making a mistake and then doing it again, making a mistake, doing it again, making the mistake. And so many of us in practice can very easily get up to sort of 10 incorrect repetitions, like very quickly. In maybe 2 minutes, you'll do a passage incorrectly 10 times. And that means that you're going to have to do it 15 times correctly for the correct thing to stick. So the real solution here and the real efficiency booster is to minimize the amount of incorrect times you do it. If you do it incorrect twice and fix the little things that you need to fix very deliberately, very quickly, and then do it correct 3 times, then you're in good shape. And that's pretty well solidified. This being said, too, just doing it 3 times correct after doing it 2 times incorrect doesn't mean that it's going to be 100% secure and totally solidified. There's a whole bunch of other stuff to do, but that's the kind of minimum that you have to do to make sure that you have the correct information going in your brain and that the correct circuit is going to be much more likely to fire than the incorrect one as you're doing other types of practice and your retrieval practice and all that kind of stuff. So that's the kind of motivation for today, giving you a little food for thought when it comes to practicing. Probably the most important thing that you can do, especially when getting started with something, is to make sure you're very clear on how it should go correctly so that you can minimize the number of mistakes. The less mistakes, the less overall repetitions that you need to do. And I beg of you and plead for you to not fall into the pointless practice trap where you're just doing the incorrect thing over and over and just hoping it's going to get better, because every rep that you do hoping that it gets better and hoping that it fixes itself, but it doesn't, is 1.5 more reps you're going to have to do it correctly to have any chance of getting it to go consistently. And if you're struggling with consistency in your practice, that's probably a big reason why, is because you're spending too much time doing incorrect reps and get maybe 10 incorrect and 2 correct on an average practice session on something. But we need to flip those numbers around and get, if you do 10 incorrect, you have to do 15 correct. Even better, do 2 incorrect and 3 correct. Then you're going to be much more consistent and get your brain soup organized in the right way to be really effective. So that's all I'll say about that for now. other than get Dr. Gebrian's book. It's Learn Faster, Perform Better. It's a fantastic book. And fill out your practice journal. Here's what mine looks like for this week. It's just the date for the week, reflection of how things are going, goal for what you want to accomplish this week, and then your schedule for when you're going to make it happen, your plan for what you want to be working on. You can get that exact template at quickstartclarinet.com/get-started. That link is in the description. And last but not least, if you want to learn more about these practice tips and things, I'm going to be doing a presentation as part of the International Clarinet Association's Enthusiast Committee annual online workshop, which is happening on May 3rd this year. So check the link in the description and you can get registered for that and come to my session where I'm going to be debunking some of these old school practice myths, some things like doing lots of repetitions is good. Well, only if you're doing good repetitions, as we just learned with learning about overlearning and why mistakes are so dangerous and why you need to be careful of them. So check that out. That link is also in the description. Have a fantastic week of practicing. Minimize your incorrect reps so you can maximize your practice efficiency. Have a fantastic week, and I will see you next week on the next live Monday Music Motivation. Have a great week.